You don't watch these films for fun. You watch them because curiosity pulls harder than caution. Each one drags you into a space where comfort dies quickly and hope feels fragile. They don't offer heroic rescues or tidy explanations. Instead, they force you to sit with cruelty, chaos, and psychological collapse. Some disturb through relentless brutality. Others twist reality until you can't trust what you're seeing. A few are slow burns that suffocate you long before anything violent happens. What they share is a refusal to soften their impact. These aren't background noise horror movies. They demand attention and punish it at the same time. When the credits roll, relief doesn't come easily. There's only silence and the lingering sense that you crossed a line. If you're stepping into this list, understand something clearly. These films don't just aim to scare you. They aim to leave a permanent mark you won't shake off easily.
Baskin, 2015. Directed by Can Evernall, Baskin descends from police procedural into a hallucinatory nightmare. A group of officers stumble upon a remote building that seems to function as a gateway to hell. The shift from grounded realism to surreal torment is abrupt and disorienting. The film leans heavily into grotesque imagery and oppressive sound design. Dim corridors and flickering lights create a suffocating environment where reality feels unstable. The cult leader figure exudes eerie calm amid chaos, amplifying dread. Violence erupts unpredictably, often framed in prolonged, nightmarish sequences. Symbolism replaces clear narrative logic, leaving viewers grasping for meaning. Baskin doesn't explain itself. It immerses you in sensory overload and existential horror. The imagery feels mythic and infernal rather than merely violent. Watching it is like wandering through a fever dream that grows darker with every step, offering no reassurance that escape is possible.
Terrifier, 2016. Directed by Damien Leone, Terrifier resurrects grindhouse brutality through the silent, sadistic presence of Art the Clown. Played with terrifying physicality by David Howard Thornton, Art doesn't speak, joke, or justify his actions. He simply mutilates with theatrical glee. The film strips narrative to its bare bones, functioning almost like a showcase for escalating practical effects. What makes it disturbing isn't just a gore, though it is extreme. It's the lingering camera. Leone refuses to cut away, forcing viewers to endure prolonged suffering without relief. The abandoned building setting feels isolating, like a nightmare with no exits. There's no deeper moral framing, no psychological excuse, just relentless cruelty presented with unnerving patience. For some, it's a throwback to exploitation cinema. For others, it's nearly unwatchable. Either way, Terrifier doesn't aim for subtlety. It aims to test your threshold and see exactly when you look away.
The Sadness, 2021. Directed by Rob Jabbaz, The Sadness transforms a viral outbreak into something far more depraved than typical zombie chaos. Infected victims don't simply kill, they indulge their darkest impulses without restraint. The film wastes little time establishing brutality, plunging into graphic, taboo-breaking violence that feels intentionally confrontational. The city becomes a playground of cruelty where safety disappears instantly. What makes it especially disturbing is the gleeful sadism of the infected, who retain awareness while committing atrocities. The tone is frantic, almost nihilistic, offering little space to breathe. Practical effects amplify the shock, refusing to sanitize any moment. Beneath the gore lies commentary on suppressed human impulses, suggesting the virus only removes filters already in place. That implication lingers long after the carnage fades. The Sadness doesn't build toward hope, it accelerates toward moral collapse, leaving viewers shaken not just by what happens, but by what it implies about humanity.
Possession, 1981. Directed by Andrzej Żuławski, Possession begins as a marital breakdown and spirals into psychological and supernatural hysteria. Isabella Gianni delivers a performance so feral and emotionally exposed, it feels dangerous to watch. Her infamous subway scene is less acting and more raw emotional exorcism. Sam Neill matches her intensity with paranoid desperation. Set against a divided Berlin, the film uses political tension as atmospheric dread. Reality fractures slowly. Jealousy morphs into monstrosity.
The creature effects are grotesque, but the emotional volatility is even more unsettling. Zulawski pushes performances to extremes, creating an operatic nightmare about love, control, and identity dissolving. The tone shifts violently between domestic drama and surreal horror, making it impossible to feel stable. Possession doesn't just disturb visually, it disturbs emotionally, leaving viewers disoriented and deeply unsettled.
Henry, Portrait of a Serial Killer, 1986. Directed by John McNaughton, this film strips serial murder of glamour and replaces it with mundane horror. Michael Rooker plays Henry with chilling restraint, avoiding theatrical villainy. The violence is sudden and unceremonious, often shown in detached ways that feel disturbingly realistic. One infamous home invasion sequence unfolds with documentary coldness, offering no dramatic music or stylized editing. The film avoids psychological overexplanation. Henry kills because he can. That simplicity is terrifying. Shot on a modest budget, the grainy visuals enhance its authenticity. There's no heroic investigator closing in, no satisfying confrontation. Just a drifting predator moving through ordinary spaces. The lack of narrative justice makes it linger uncomfortably. Watching it feels less like entertainment and more like observing something you shouldn't see. Henry doesn't sensationalize evil, it presents it plainly, which somehow makes it far more disturbing.
Raw, 2016. Directed by Julia Ducournau, Raw blends body horror with a coming-of-age story that turns cannibalism into metaphor. Garance Marielier plays a sheltered vegetarian student who develops an unsettling craving after a hazing ritual. The transformation is gradual, almost intimate. The horror lies in appetite and identity shifting simultaneously. Ducournau films physical changes with clinical precision, making every bite feel transgressive. Beneath the shock is commentary on repression and inherited impulses. The tone balances vulnerability with visceral imagery, creating discomfort that feels emotional as much as physical. Festival screenings reportedly caused fainting, though much of the film relies on tension rather than explicit gore. Raw disturbs because it links desire and horror inseparably. It's not just about consuming flesh, it's about discovering parts of yourself you never wanted to acknowledge. That internal unraveling makes it linger far beyond its most graphic moments.
Frontiers, 2007. Directed by Xavier Gens, Frontiers merges political unrest with rural brutality. A group of young criminals fleeing riots hide at an isolated inn only to discover a family harboring fascist ideology and violent traditions. The film wastes little time escalating into graphic torture and survival horror. Its grim setting amplifies hopelessness, with cramped basements and decaying structures trapping characters physically and psychologically. The antagonists aren't masked monsters, but ideologically driven extremists, grounding horror in human cruelty. Practical effects emphasize pain with uncomfortable realism. Beneath the bloodshed lies commentary on nationalism and generational hatred. The pacing rarely slows, creating relentless pressure. Frontiers doesn't aim for subtlety. It confronts viewers with brutality head-on, forcing them to endure escalating atrocities. By the end, survival feels less triumphant and more hollow. The violence leaves residue, not excitement, making it one of the more punishing entries in extreme horror.
The Lodge, 2019. Directed by Veronica Franz and Severin Fiala, The Lodge traps grief and religious trauma inside a snowbound cabin. Riley Keough plays a woman haunted by her past, isolated with 2 children who may not trust her. The slow burn pacing builds unease through silence and stark winter landscapes. Snow becomes both beautiful and imprisoning. Psychological manipulation creeps in subtly, blurring the line between reality and delusion. The film withholds information carefully, letting dread accumulate rather than explode. When revelations surface, they feel devastating rather than shocking. Themes of faith and guilt deepen the emotional weight. The horror is less about sudden violence and more about mental erosion. By the final act, the atmosphere feels suffocating, as though hope froze long before the characters realized it. The lodge lingers because its cruelty feels intimate and tragically human.
Climax, 2018. Directed by Gaspar Noé, Climax begins as a celebratory dance rehearsal before descending into drug-fueled hysteria. The camera floats through corridors in long, unbroken takes, creating hypnotic immersion. When sangria is spiked with LSD, paranoia spreads rapidly among the troupe. Sofia Boutella anchors the chaos with escalating panic. The vibrant lighting shifts from warm tones to violent reds, mirroring psychological collapse. Noé refuses to cut away from prolonged confrontations and emotional breakdowns. The choreography transforms into convulsions, beauty mutating into horror. There's no central villain. The threat is collective unraveling. The film feels improvisational, heightening unpredictability. As tensions boil over, the building becomes a maze of accusation and cruelty. Climax disturbs because it traps you in sustained chaos without narrative rescue. It feels less like watching characters spiral and more like being trapped inside their shared nightmare.
The Nightingale, 2018. Directed by Jennifer Kent, The Nightingale blends historical drama with harrowing revenge. Set in colonial Tasmania, it follows a young Irish convict pursuing a British officer responsible for unspeakable violence. Aisling Franciosi delivers a performance steeped in grief and fury. The brutality is unflinching and grounded, refusing to stylize trauma. Scenes of violence are prolonged and emotionally devastating, emphasizing suffering rather than spectacle. The landscape is vast yet isolating, underscoring the loneliness of pursuit. Themes of colonial oppression and generational trauma deepen the narrative weight. This isn't revenge as empowerment, it's revenge as burden. The emotional toll accumulates steadily, making each confrontation feel heavy rather than thrilling. By the end, the film leaves a somber stillness instead of triumph. The Nightingale disturbs not through fantasy, but through its stark depiction of historical cruelty and human endurance.
Disturbance lingers differently for everyone. Some viewers recoil at gore. Others are shaken more by psychological collapse or emotional cruelty. What binds these films together is their refusal to comfort. They don't reassure you that good will prevail cleanly. They don't provide easy catharsis. Instead, they press on wounds, personal, societal, existential, and refuse to let you look away. Watching them becomes a test of endurance as much as curiosity. You might admire the craft, you might respect the performances, but enjoyment feels like the wrong word. When the credits roll, silence takes over. Maybe you question why filmmakers push boundaries so far. Maybe you question why you chose to witness it. That uneasy self-reflection is their true power. Disturbing horror doesn't fade into background noise. It settles deep, resurfacing unexpectedly in quiet moments. And once it's there, you realize some images never truly leave.